Where's the will, there's a way. It takes only one good gentleman called Fuzzy that I wanted to film for about 2 years, I think, to make it happen. And we are today in Morrisville, North Carolina. The name of the lounge is Gold Leaf, and it's a wonderful place, and it's a proper cigar lounge that I was thinking about calling it a diamond in a rough, but it's not exactly the rough.
It's a nice place.
It's a nice neighborhood around it. Today we're going to hear 3 or 4 or 5 stories that Fuzzy has for us.
I consider myself very, very fortunate in that I grew up in Speedway, Indiana, and I always wanted to race cars. I always wanted to be in racing, and I was able to make my living doing that. And through doing that, I've always told people that the racing industry is a bit like, as I perceive the music industry would be, right? So you got roadies, you're traveling, shipping every port type thing or whatever. I started my career in IMSA racing, which is road course racing. I did, 8 or 10 years in that. And then I was in IndyCar for 10 years or so. And then I went in NASCAR. So for the major racing industries in the United States, I pretty much got to touch the 3 big ones and be involved in it. And we always have to remember that, like a lot of sports, while it's competitive and it's a sport, it's still a show, right? Mm-hmm. And the name of the game of the show is to have people watch it, have more eyes on the sponsors, and all that. So a lot of times the sanctioning bodies will help make sure, at least in motorsports, make sure that there's a somewhat level playing field for everybody, right? The cream's always going to come to the top. But one of the ways of having parity or having a motorsports stay competitive or stay on somewhat equal field is the sanctioning groups will impose rules, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a rule book, and as a team, your job is to beat everybody else, and to beat everybody else, you have to optimize everything about the rule book and about the team. So
how about bending the rules?
Well, that's sometimes how you gain an advantage is bending the rules, and I think some forms of motorsports are better at bending the rules, and maybe it's on how the rule book's designed. The more technical a rule book becomes, the thicker the rule book becomes, the smaller the gains that you find that you need to find. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, typically those smaller gains cost a lot more money than the big gains, right? It's easy to find 10 horsepower when the rule book's open. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard to find a half a horsepower or 1 horsepower when the rule book's closed down tight, and you got to find those. It costs a lot of money. So, in the case of IndyCar, the mechanics are the pit crew, right? Mm-hmm. So we trained 1 or 2 days a week doing pit stop practice. The rest of the time we were working on the race car. That our normal part of our job. And then on the weekends, when the race came, we were also the pit crew. In the case of NASCAR, the top echelon of NASCAR's Cup and the pit crews in NASCAR, that's their entire job. They are professional athletes. That's all they do. That's all they train for.
You're telling me that these guys who are basically refueling the car, mm-hmm. right? That's the only thing that they're doing?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. And that's what they focus on. Now, so some of them have jobs in the shop during the week. Uh-huh. And I'm not trying to minimize whatever that job is, but that's not their main focus. Their main focus is to be an athlete and to be the fastest at their pit stop.
To be an athlete?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that, to be an athlete?
Well, they train. I don't know, I wasn't ever one of them, so I don't know the exact weights, but, the jack weighs a certain amount, right? The wheels and tires weigh a certain amount, and you have to be able to throw those around. You have to be very agile and athletic. They film every portion of the pit stop. During the pit stop, they film every portion of the pit stop during practice, and they analyze every footstep, every movement, every motion of their body to cut down and make it more and more perfect. So, the top teams that have those guys, those are the top echelon of athletes to do that.
Have you ever tried to lift a tire that they put on or change?
When I was in IndyCar, I changed front tires, and I was also the fueler.
How did you feel?
Oh, it's exhilarating. There's nothing like being at the Indianapolis 500, being in the pit box. We were allowed to be over the wall when the car was coming in.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of NASCAR, they can't jump over the wall until the car's a certain distance from them, right? It's a safety thing. But when I was doing it in IndyCar, we were all already over the wall. So in the case of inside front tire changer, I was on my knees with my spare tire and my gun ready to go. And as the car came in, you're trying to time hitting the wheel nut and taking one tire off, putting the other tire on. And it's the same with the fueling. I enjoy doing the fuel more.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe because there's only one fuel guy and there's 4 tire guys.
Is the hose heavy?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Really heavy?
When the time I was doing it, well, I'm not a very big guy, so it couldn't have been that heavy.
Mm.
But at the time I was doing it, I believe it was a 4-inch fuel hose,
Right.
and there was a given length. Right, you could only make it so short because the shorter it is, the faster it's going to fuel.
Mm.
And then there was a vent hose, and then there was a refueling head. I don't remember what that weighed, but you're kind of holding it at your waist. But what we would practice is, as the car was coming in, I wouldn't wait for the car to stop and then stab the fuel thing. As the car's coming in, I'm pulling along with the car and already trying to stab the fuel nozzle in to make the fueling shorter.
When you said athletes, you called them athletes. Mm-hmm. Does it mean that they go to the gym or they do certain things?
Yeah.
Really?
All the big teams have a gym there. They have personal trainers there. In the case of in the case of Hendrick Motorsports, when you drive up to their facility, there's a training facility out front. All the major Cup teams have it. There's businesses that are pit stop training schools for guys coming up from the grassroots to go and try to get a little bit to do it. But it's very, very competitive. And I don't know if cutthroat's the right word, but it's very competitive. Hundredths of a second count in a pit stop. And if a guy makes a mistake a couple times, there's somebody else right there to come in and take his position.
It's like even the part you described. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking about the money people are pumping into just reach, like, I don't know, half a second, quarter of a second faster compared to their opponent or competitor or whatever it is. It's staggering because you need to feed these guys this 4 tire changing crew, or you need to provide them with a particular facility or pay for the particular facility they go to train. You need to hire a trainer to, God almighty, I mean, this is mesmerizing.
It's a very, very expensive sport, and a lot of the times it's kind of a funny dynamic where the team owners will be beating on the guys, the management of the team, that we're spending too much money on this or spending too much money on that, yet they all want to win, right? So they'll spend the money on whatever they think's the right stuff, and then the sanctioning group gets involved, and this is across the board in all forms of racing. They'll try to put rules in that are cost savings rules. Well, the cost savings rules, in my opinion, everybody's still trying to win. So now you got to find somewhere else to get that advantage. And like I said, as the rules tighten down, a lot of times it gets more and more expensive to find the smaller and smaller gains.
So basically what you were saying is, if I get it right, so the moment a certain team finds just this little piece that gives it whatever the time advantage or, speed advantage, then the sanctioning committee comes in, right, and saying, you know what, either you can't have it or everyone else should have it. Is it true?
Yeah, it's a cat and mouse game, right?
Right.
So as long as the team's finding a small advantage and they're not abusing that advantage and just going out and completely taking advantage of things, the advantage works until somebody else finds out that you've got that advantage, right? And then once two or three find out you've got that advantage, and there starts the parity starts going away, or the show, or what any of the groups are trying to achieve as far as marketability and entertainment value and racing and competition, they'll try to come out with something to limit that advantage.
So it's almost like doping in cycling. The scientists are coming.
Yeah, I would think it's probably a little less less invasive or whatever, right? So you're not putting something.
Well, it doesn't affect your health that much, right. I guess, but
right. But I don't think when it comes to competition, I don't think what it is. My 6-year-old dad plays pickleball 2 or 3 times a week, right? And he was the type. I mean, I love him to death. He was Mr. Penny Pitcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now, he's buying like $200 pickleball rackets, and he's got this pickleball shoe and that pickleball shoe. It's like, dude, Dad, you're 86 and you're playing pickleball. It's like, or it doesn't matter if it's a hobby that you enjoy or something like that. We can, especially if competition's involved. You want to up the next guy. You want to, right? It just
but
it costs more money to do it.
Well, yeah, but it's big money behind it, and a huge audience in this country when it comes to NASCAR and Indy, and huge audience all over the world when it comes to Formula One. So, yeah, the stakes are very high.
Right. But
tell me a little bit. I don't know that much about this particular racing.
Right.
But I understand that Baja is a desert.
Yeah.
Right?
It's in the Baja Desert of Mexico.
Right. And it should be a little bit hot over there.
It was a little bit of everything. So it could be very cool in the morning when you're on the coast. We had to be at the start line at 5:30 in the morning. The day we were riding on the beach, we did about 8 or 9 miles nonstop on the beach first thing in the morning, which was absolutely magical, epic. And then that same day, when we got into the interior of the peninsula, it was 90 degrees, dusty, and there wasn't anything but lizards and cactus, rocks, everything. Anything you can imagine's in the desert, we rode on it. To me, racing in the desert is almost like having your first child, right? People can talk to you about it. They can tell you about it. They can show you pictures. They can describe it. But until you do it, you just don't get it. And saying, you're concentrating so hard. It's physically, I'm 58 years old.
Should be exhausting.
I was. And there was a few times I wanted to throw in the towel and I was done. I didn't want to do it anymore. But luckily I had a buddy riding with me that did it a lot, and he's 62, way faster, way more in shape than me. I can't train. I trained in the gym a lot, but I can't ride that terrain here in North Carolina to practice.
Right.
And we had radios. His name's Jay Bartoli, and we had radios, so we could talk to each other. So there was a few times he had to talk me off the ledge of just throwing in the towel, because you ride in the sand dunes on a 320-pound motorcycle, and it falls over in the sand, and you got to pick it up 5 or 6 times. My heart, you ever had your heart beat so bad where you can hear it in your ears? It's beating. So that, that's going on. And I'm just like, what am I doing this for? You big dummy.
And how long did it take? Like the full?
It was 6 days. Yeah. We do,
But you slept at night?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not like
it wasn't
24/7.
No. It was a stage race. So you'd have a rally, you'd have a special stage that was timed in off-road, then you'd have a transfer stage on the pavement. That's when you can fuel, eat, do what you need to do. Then you get to the second stage and do a second stage.
And what was the result, I guess I should ask you?
Well, the best result is I didn't die. The second best result was that my wife Marcy was there to meet me at the finish line. But there were 30 motorcycles in the motorcycle class. I think cars. I think there was 260 cars and trucks
Mm-hmm.
in it. And miraculously, I don't know how, but I finished 12th
Wow.
out of 30
That is
in the
that is an
motorcycles.
amazing result for an amateur.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm completely surprised, and I was completely content to be dead last and just finish it. That was my goal, was just to do it and finish it. It wasn't to win. It wasn't to get a trophy, or it wasn't to get a plaque or anything like that.
Will you do it again?
I want to ride in the desert plenty more times, but I'm not sure I will do that race.
And why?
The logistics of it was 2 years in planning. I'm not even going to say how much money it cost. Even with the sponsors, it was a huge financial outlay. You have to ship the bike out to California, hire a group to chase for the support, all the hotels, all the food. It's a huge endeavor, and there's a lot of stress involved in it. There's 2 years of buildup and a lot of anxiety leading up to it, and then during it, you're kind of numb to all that, and then when it's over, you're like, oh my gosh, it's done now.
Going back to you growing up,
Mhm.
as far as I understand, you had an event that changed your life completely. Will you be able to talk about that a little?
Yeah. It was shortly after high school. I was 18 or 19 years old. Had just got a job with a race team. Um, that particular weekend, I was at a college with a buddy of mine. We didn't drink or anything like that, but we just stayed up all night. So came back home and decided to go into the shop to get some work done. Drove the company dually home, which was only about 10 minutes to my house. Went in, picked up a paintbrush. I was driving back, and next thing I know, there's a huge crash, and I can see in my mind's eye me in the truck with another vehicle sliding across the intersection and getting out. Getting out, and the lady that was in the passenger seat, it was very obvious what her outcome was. I remember hearing kids crying, and I run around to the driver's side, and the male gets out, and he's yelling and screaming at me. And long story short, for an 18-year-old, I fell asleep, ran a red light. Unfortunately, the lady lost her life. And the kids were hurt, and that was a big life changing thing for me. And we go, fast forward now to being 58 years old, and if I go back to Indianapolis and I happen to drive through that intersection, and sometimes I'll intentionally drive through that intersection.
Why?
I don't know. I was getting ready to just tell you I don't know why, but it's such a big part of my life, I guess, that yeah, I don't know, but I do know one thing that happens now, that if I hear something on the news or I see something in social media where somebody has an unfortunate accident like that, especially if it's someone young, it's a teenager, and they make a mistake, or they have a lapse in judgment, or something just happens, and they're involved in an accident where they take the life, I think is our immediate reaction is to jump on that person and how dare them, and they need to be punished to the full extent of the law, and this and that and that and this. But I can tell you, sitting here right now, that teenager, just like me, is going to have to live with that the rest of their lives, that they were involved in that unfortunate accident. It's unfortunate on both sides. It's a tragedy on both sides, and it can't be changed. And everybody needs to take responsibility for our actions. But I also feel that with social media and stuff like that, we need to temper ourselves into jumping on jumping on those people because they have, I'm not talking about a murderer or a robber or something like that. I'm talking about something that's
Understandably.
it's an accident, right? It's a lack of judgment. It's an accident, and those people like myself have to live with that the rest of our freaking lives.
So when you got married, did you tell your wife? Did you tell your wife
Mhm.
about it?
Mm-hmm.
What was her reaction?
Consoling and yeah, there was actually, if I could, I'll try to make this short. There was actually a point where right after Marcy and I got married, and we were in our first house. I wasn't during the process of depositions in the court and all that. I was never allowed to speak to any of the witnesses or speak to anybody involved in the accident.
And you never spoke at them at all?
Nope, I didn't. But right after the accident happened, I completely lost my composure, as I guess you would think an 18-year-old boy seeing what I saw did, and then knowing that I was the cause of it. There was one one witness that stayed with me and consoled me the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I knew what his name was after that. I knew his name was, but I was never allowed to reach out to him. So now fast forward from, 1984, 85 to, I don't know, 90, 10, 12 years later, I just got a wild hair. We still had phone books then. I just got a wild hair, and I knew this guy's name, and I knew he lived on the west. I assumed he still lived on the west side of Indianapolis, and I started going through the phone book and cold calling everybody with that last name until I got that number, and it happened to be him that answered. And I distinctly remember sitting on my bed, and I make this phone call off a landline, a land phone. And I said, "Hey, this might seem like a weird call. My name's so and so, and were you at the scene of an accident on April 12th, 1986?" And it was him, and he knew me. He knew it right there.
And you had a conversation.
I had a conversation with him. I thanked him. I got emotional, and I actually found out where he worked at, and I went to visit him after that and thank him. And it was all that time after that I finally got to thank him for staying with me and consoling me through the whole thing.
But you never talked to the family.
I wonder, when it comes up in my head, I wonder what their lives were like.
Sometimes maybe it's for the better.
Right.
Yeah. But almost 40 years after, and I guess you weren't able to block it, but there are certain events that we can't block no matter how much we want to.
Yep.